Welcome to the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels that they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across the table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. In today's episode, we are going to be continuing through part 1 of Dr. Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. Part 1, again, the experiences in a concentration camp. So in today's episode, we'll be covering the topics of challenge goals, and ultimately avoiding the loss of faith and the loss of faith in the future. So to the book. We have stated that which was ultimately responsible for the state of the prisoner's inner self was not so much the enumerated psychophysical causes as it was the result of a free decision. Psychological observations of the prisoners have shown that only the men who allowed their inner hold on their moral and spiritual selves to subside eventually fell victim to the camp's denigrating influences. The question now arises, what could or should have constituted this inner hold? Former prisoners, when writing or relating their experiences, agree that the most depressing influences of all was that a prisoner could not know how long his term of imprisonment would be. He had been given no date for his release. It was impossible to foresee whether or when, if at all, this form of existence would end. The Latin word finis has two meanings: the end or the finish, and the goal to reach. A man who could not see the end of his provisional existence was not able to aim at an ultimate goal in life. He ceased living for the future in contrast to a man in normal life. Therefore, the whole structure of his inner life changed. Signs of decay set in, which we know from other areas of life. The unemployed worker, for example, is in a similar position. His existence has become provisional, and in a certain sense, he cannot live for the future or aim at a goal. Prisoners, too, suffered from this strange time experience. In camp, a small time unit, a day, for example, filled with hourly tortures and fatigue, appeared endless. A larger time unit, perhaps a week, seemed to pass very quickly. My comrades agreed when I said that in camp a day lasted longer than a week. How paradoxical was our time experience. Without a future and without a goal. So I'm going to pause there and come out of the book just momentarily, and again take an overlay my own experiences, especially pertaining to the unknown time period, and again recognizing that it really does feel impossible to compare it to such a tragic and extreme existence and experience that Dr. Frankl provides here, but ultimately that is the point of his work here, is taking these principles and these learnings from the most extreme of examples, and yet still being able to apply it to everyday common life that we experience. And with regards to just the time experience, as well as the inability to feel like you can persevere and continue trudging forward with the unknown length of time that a period of suffering would last. Again, before entering into recovery, the first time that I read this book, I genuinely didn't know how long the suffering, the battle with alcoholism, the obsessive desire for seeking and finding control would last. And the most agonizing part of all of that was feeling the drift and disconnection between what I knew and felt was my authentic self and the way I was behaving and the way that life seemed to be going for me. And again, there was an aspect where it was just such an unknown and unclear finish line, and also how long it was going to take me to get there. I've mentioned this in previous work, but episodes or the newsletter, but I really started thinking in the weeks leading into finally going to rehab about what it would all take to sort of right the ship. If I never had to admit to anybody that I had been drinking in isolation for those 2.5 years, I knew that in order to gain the trust of my loved ones, in order to merge kind of the deviated stories between my work life, between the life that I was building out for the therapist that I was seeing, I genuinely started to project that forward and felt that it was a 2 to 3 year journey if I actually had the ability to start controlling my drinking, which I didn't, and I knew that. And so just this incredible amount of time and effort that laid out in front of me as I deepened my thinking about that path and that possible journey I would have to go on, just absolutely brought me into the pits of despair, but also brought me to what ultimately ended up being the end and the finish line of that struggle pre-recovery. And what that was the acceptance that I had no control. And so for those of you that are out there that are really struggling with the idea of all of the hurt and the years of just torturous struggle to get to where you are and still feel like there's no end in sight, now being on the other side, I can say with complete certainty and confidence that acceptance of your lack of control, acceptance of my own inability to drink and not have my mind completely taken over, acceptance was that finish line. But I was so scared of it for so long that it seemed forever off in the future. And then conversely, with our experience while in recovery with Lucy, with another instance where we genuinely didn't know what our lives would look like for the foreseeable future, was leading up to our birth. We had left Idaho, we had left our home in a state and with the knowledge that we might have to sell it. We might never be able to really come back and live in our house because maybe there were the specific medical centers that we had to live around. Like when we got to Minnesota, we actually discovered more about Lucy's heart that really played out the potential future for us and needing to be near the Stanford Medical Center for years while Lucy's health progressed and surgical needs progressed. And despite having, and then once Lucy was born, entering into that NICU phase of her life, just truly not knowing how long we were going to be there and figuring out ways even early on how to set ourselves on a path to be the sustained energy and support and the role of parent that she needed, that Grant needed during all of that. It was a complete different experience despite falling into that same sort of category and concept around not understanding the timeline of your existence in this space. And I would say the biggest differences was, really, and we'll get to it further here in this section, but like really having that spiritual strength, having that relationship, as well as having a very clear and objective goal. With Lucy, it was to show up every single day, to be the parent that she needed as best as we could, and to be accepting of the fact that there was only so much that we were in control of. So with that, back to the book. A man who let himself decline because he could not see any future goal found himself occupied with retrospective thoughts. But in robbing the present of its reality, there lay a certain danger. It became easy to overlook the opportunities to make something positive of camp life, opportunities which really did exist. I'm going to pause there and come out of the book really quick and just acknowledge like how reading this story and reading the experiences of Dr. Frankl and just connecting with the incredible aspect and the incredible power in those words, that someone who went through the horrific and unimaginable experience that he did still was able to put pen to paper and genuinely write those words out. And looking back at my story, when I was struggling with alcoholism before entering into recovery, I looked at the world and labeled things in terms of they're always this way or they're never that way. I saw primarily problems that existed in the world. And sometimes I would try to find solutions, but I really viewed things through the lens of problems. One of the things that Lucy, in a big way, has taught me, and supplemented certainly by like the recovery practices, but viewing things through the lens of potential, striving for growth. A big recovery saying is progress, not perfection. And that is so core and so imperative to being able to view things through this mindset. Like look for those moments of progression, find that growth opportunity and strive for it. Put effort behind it. Back to the book. Such people forgot that often it is just as exceptionally difficult external situation which gives man the opportunity to grow spiritually beyond himself. Instead of taking the camp's difficulties as a test of their inner strength, they did not take their life seriously and despised it as something of no consequence. They preferred to close their eyes and to live in the past. Life for such people became meaningless. And I had one note next to this section, and it really is the mentality that I had fallen into prior to entering into rehab. And it is the statement that I said over and over again, and that I ingrained into my core until I entered into recovery and really started doing the work to counter how much this thought pattern and this view of the world was ingrained in me. And that is, fuck it. It doesn't matter. I had, without a doubt, lost hope in my battle with alcoholism. I thought there was no way out. I thought there was no meaning, no purpose, no rectifying the situation that I was in. And thank God that I was wrong. Back to the book. We could say that most men in a concentration camp believed that the real opportunities of life had passed. Yet, in reality, there was an opportunity and a challenge. One could make a victory of those experiences, turning life into an inner triumph, or one could ignore the challenge and simply vegetate, as did a majority of the prisoners. Again, before moving on to the next section, just really underscoring how incredible it is that someone who went through such an experience as Dr. Frankl and his friends and comrades, as he calls them, to write such profound and meaningful words. Back to the book. Any attempt at fighting the camp's psychopathological influence on a prisoner by psychotherapeutic or psychohygienic methods had to aim at giving him inner strength by pointing out to him a future goal to which he could look forward. Instinctively, some of the prisoners attempted to find one on their own. It is a peculiarity of man that he can only live by looking to the future. And this is his salvation in the most difficult moments of his existence, although he sometimes has to force his mind to the task. I remember a personal experience. Almost in tears from pain, I limped a few kilometers with our long column of men from the camp to our worksite. Very cold, bitter wind struck at us. I kept thinking of the endless little problems of our miserable life. What would there be to eat tonight? If a piece of sausage came as extra ration, should I exchange it for a piece of bread? Should I trade my last cigarette, which was left from a bonus I received a fortnight ago, for a bowl of soup? How could I get a piece of wire to replace a fragment which served as one of my shoelaces? Would I get to our worksite in time to join my usual working party, or would I have to join another, which might have a brutal foreman? What could I do to get on good terms with the capo, who could help me obtain work in camp instead of undertaking this horribly long daily march? I became disgusted with the state of affairs, which compelled me, daily and hourly, to think of only such trivial things. I forced my thoughts to turn to another subject. Suddenly, I saw myself standing on the platform of a well-lit, warm, and pleasant lecture room. In front of me sat an attentive audience on comfortable upholstered seats. I was giving a lecture on psychology of the concentration camp. All that oppressed me at that moment became objective, seen and described from the remote viewpoint of science. By this method, I succeeded somehow in rising above the situation, above the sufferings of the moment, and I observed them as if they were already in the past. Both I and my troubles became the object of an interesting psychoscientific study undertaken by myself. What does Spinoza say in his Ethics? Emotion, which is suffering, ceases to be suffering as soon as we form a clear and precise picture of it. The prisoner who had lost faith in the future, his future, was doomed. With his loss of belief in the future, he also lost his spiritual hold. He let himself decline and become subject to mental and physical decay. Usually this happened quite suddenly, in the form of a crisis, the symptoms of which were familiar to the experienced camp inmate. We all feared this moment, not for ourselves, which would have been pointless, but for our friends. Usually it began with the prisoner refusing one morning to get dressed and wash or go out on the parade grounds. No entreaties, no blows, no threats had any effect. He just lay there, hardly moving. If this crisis was brought about by an illness, he refused to be taken to the sick bay or to do anything to help himself. He simply gave up. There he remained, lying in his own excrement, and nothing bothered him anymore. Coming out of the book, that last section in particular, loss of faith in the future, it just really cuts to the core of a huge piece of the struggle for myself, especially in the last months of battling my alcoholism, but also just generally for those who suffer with addiction in their lives. Honestly, desiring and wanting to better themselves, but feeling like they can't, or they are struggling to figure it out. The more often that the cycles happen where there was a push and motivation to improve, to change, only to be completely crushed by another bender or another relapse. And those cycles add up. And each time they come to fruition, that faith in the future, that someday things might get better, feels like it's closing in on you. And I feel lucky. Reflecting back, I would say, in a very big way, my faith was nearly lost entirely in the future. I think 99.9% of my being felt that everything was useless. It was all lost. There was no point. But I think there was just enough, just that small sliver and bit of hope that had me clinging desperately to the edge, hopeful and giving everything that I had, as weak and as useless as it felt in the moment, to just hold on for one moment longer. And as I said before, it wasn't until taking that first step, truly reflecting on your behavior, on your story, on your thought patterns, and realizing that life as I had lived it, yes, there was not much in the future the way that things were going. I could not manage it. And that is the point. That is the point where I was finally able to see, where I was finally able to accept that I didn't have control, that life was fully unmanageable for me. And only through the action of acceptance was I able to start rediscovering and finding faith in an unbelievable and high potential future. So that's all I've got for you this week. Love to y'all. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others who might find it impactful, and give us a rating through your streaming platform of choice. Ratings and comments help spread the work to others who are desperately searching for a solution. This simple action could have profound impacts on the lives of others. My hope is that my story can help those who feel alone in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and know that this life is full of abundant joy and wonder, and is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you must endure. Until next time.